Welcome back to the Business Simple podcast. It's your host, James. With me in the studio, I have Renee Walker. Renee is a Christchurch-based leadership strategist and executive known for her contributions to the city's post-quake recovery, community engagement initiatives, and business leadership insights. With over 2 decades of experience spanning corporate, government, and non-profit sectors, Renee has held key roles driving communication, culture change, and community development. She describes herself as a passionate Otatahi cheerleader, championing collaboration and authenticity in pursuit of the best outcomes for a community. Renee, thank you so much for taking the time to come join us today.
Kia ora, thanks for having me, James.
Absolute pleasure. As I mentioned earlier, so I had a really fun time this morning doing a bit of research into you and having a look at some of the things you've been involved in and that sort of thing. Our typical starting point for these episodes is just to go over a little bit of your sort of story, how you've wound up here, where you started, and just kind of what some of those key steps were along the way, if that's all right.
Yep, sure.
Yeah, cool.
So I'm happy to just tell you a story and jump in at any time you like.
Cool.
I would say when people ask me what I do, I've never been defined by a title, and I'm not interested in other people's titles. I'm interested in who they are as a person. And that's really defined my career. If people ask me what I do today, I say I create space for people to succeed by being themselves. Yep. And so what I think I'm very good at and what I'm very passionate about is being myself and being confident enough to do that. And when I talk about creating the space, it's seeing every individual for the individual that they are. And that space might be different. It might be a corporate environment. It might be a community platform. It might be a leadership team that needs to be more psychologically safe. And so if I look back on my career and what's defined me, it has always been staying very true to that. I started off my career, I went to university in Sydney and I was going to be a teacher. And then I had someone who believed in me. I started working at a publishing company. And at the end of the year, when I was going to go off and do teaching, he said to me, would you consider staying? And I said, well, if I go to university part-time, it will take me 6 years. If I go full-time, it will take me 3 years. I don't know where I'm going to be in 6 years, so I'm going full-time. So he came back, understand that, but what if you could work full-time and go to university full-time? I said, yeah, well, I would look at that. But why would you want a teacher working at a publishing company? And he said, well, you would probably study something different. So I went and studied marketing and business. And from there, again, because he saw me as an individual, I think that really helped to shape me on my journey of seeing everyone as individuals. And then I came back to New Zealand and I stayed in that marketing space. But for me, it was always about marketing and communications. And in those days, there were 2 quite very different functions. Yep. I think today we get that marketing and communications and sales and engagement and all those things are very connected. Yep. But they're very much about connection with humans, right? Yep. It's about the people at the centre of it. So worked in that marketing and communications space. And then at the time of the earthquakes, and so another passion is education. So I've continued to educate myself, but also I'm really interested in how do we connect people to education. I was the first in my family to go to university. I had a principal who told me I wouldn't amount to anything. And so I thought that day, right, game on, I will. Yeah. And I will make sure that other people know that they can too. Yeah. So very passionate about connecting people to education. So when I came back to Christchurch, I was the student recruitment and marketing manager at the university. While I was there, I did my MBA, but I also connected to a lot of high schools and a lot of young students and got a lot of energy from that. And then if we fast forward to the earthquakes, I worked at that time for the Economic Development Agency. And again, I thought, here is a city. I love this city. I really do love this city. And it was this city that was hurt, and we were hurt by Mother Nature, and people wanted someone to blame, but they also wanted someone that they could connect with. And so when I looked at that, I went, okay, well, what's going to have the most impact in post-earthquake Christchurch, and where can I get in and add some value? And so I went from the Economic Development Agency, where we formed Recover Canterbury. I ran the business access program into town. I worked with the army. We were on the cordons around here. We were registering businesses and helping them get their essential business items out so they could keep operating. But that had a lifetime, right? Sure. We were making sure we were there at government. We kept Christchurch on the national agenda. And then I looked at it and went, okay, well, what's the next stage? The next stage is insurance. And so I spent almost a decade working in insurance, but I would still say today I'm not an insurance person. I'm a people person.
Yeah.
And so I went there
it.
because, again, I want to help people rebuild their lives.
Yeah.
When I started at EQC, I remember someone saying to me, oh, here's this letter, and it says about your dwelling and a pertinent structure. And I said, and what the hell is an appurtenant structure? And they said, a garage. I was like, so why doesn't they say home and garage? Like, talk to people in a language they understand.
Yeah.
And also understand that every single person who's got a home that's broken has a story. So when you go out to see that person, learn that story and see that person and connect with that person. So I am very proud of the work that I did in insurance, but I'm proud that I'm still not an insurance person. I respect insurance. I think it's there to protect you when you need it, but actually it's all about people. And so, yeah, as I say, everything that I do now, I spend more time working on executive coaching, team dynamics, again, enabling people to access the skills and support they need to develop their leadership skills so that they can see people and help people succeed.
I love that so much, the people thing. And it's something that I talk about fairly regularly in this, but a lot internally with the team is we run marketing, right? And we do it for oftentimes what are like reasonably big corporations that are quite numbers orientated and outcome driven. But the truth is that as soon as you start treating your messaging in the same way, the numbers will never continue to come because people don't feel like they're being listened to. They don't feel like they're being understood. And we talk, you mentioned the connection of, say, marketing and communications and sales. We talk about that all the time too, is if you call up and you just aggressively qualify out a lead because you don't want to waste your time, you're going to have a lower hit rate than someone who goes, I want to understand all of these people who I'm talking to and get a feel for what they want, and I'll see if I have a solution for them as an alternative. What a cool story, obviously, with a few different areas. How did you find, you obviously have quite a very obvious, like bubbly, passionate personality. When you're dealing with something like insurance in an environment like the earthquakes, what was the toll that had on you like?
I am very purpose driven. So I knew right from the very start why I wanted to work in insurance, and I wanted to work there to help people to rebuild their lives. And so every day, as long as I knew that I was doing the best that I could do to do that, then I could stand by everything that I did and everything that my team did. And when I say it was hard, I ended up as Deputy Chief Executive at EQC. I was sent bullets in the post. I had threats. I had threats against my family. But I would always stand up. I would stand up in packed meetings of community groups and say, I can't change what's happened, but I'm here today to put a face to this and to say, I'm sorry, and I will help you, and I'll help you move forward. And I think because people saw that, I wasn't faceless. I wasn't hiding. My own home was a total loss. I was going through everything that everyone else was going through, and I was going through it alongside them.
Yeah.
And I mean, last week I was at a Business Canterbury event and someone came up to me and he said to me, you won't remember me, but he said, it's because of you that my home was rebuilt, and told me the story. And I said, I remember exactly who you are, and you had a young family and you lived in St. Albans and your home was broken and all you needed was someone to listen to you. And again, I do think it's a shame that sometimes with large organisations, individuals can't get to that right person. But I do believe that particularly through the earthquake, it was hard to work in that environment, but people wanted to help. And if you could take away the noise and take away the anger and appreciate that people needed someone to blame, but I would always say to myself, they don't know me. They don't actually blame me. They don't hate me. They don't know that I've got a broken home myself. They don't know who I am as a person. But as long as my purpose is positive and real, then I can kind of deal with all of that noise.
Sure, yeah. And you are so correct, right? And it's the same with, I suppose, nowadays people, it's really common to get negative feedback online or something like that. They don't know who you are. No. They're not, and if you are truly trying to do something purposeful, there's probably not a way to do that won't involve some negative feedback. So if that's your driver, then you have really got no choice.
I do remember once when I was at IAG, one of my staff said to me, how does it feel to be the second most hated person in Christchurch? And I said, what are you talking about? And she said, don't you read the stuff comments? And I said, no, for a reason, because that person has no idea who I am. So yes, they hate the idea of what I'm representing, or they are hurt by the experience they've had, but that's not about me, and I don't take that on. I think probably also the ADHD. So I have ADHD, and I have, I've probably got mechanisms of going, actually, I know what I'm put here to do, and I'm put here to help people. And as long as I can help people, then that's my driver. Yep. I don't need everyone to like me. I know that I'm not everyone's cup of tea, but I know why I'm doing it.
It is on a smaller scale and with nowhere near the responsibility that you had. I've had my own journey that's been very similar to that, is trying to get my head around, I want to be young and I want to do something that I feel aligns with my purpose. And I think it's really easy to put that into this like capitalist take over the world bucket, but it's really not. I just love the impact of growing businesses and the fact that you can build teams and, create jobs and do all those sorts of things for people. But if you do that in any sort of a way, you will naturally draw, and I don't help myself sometimes, but you'll naturally draw that negativity out. I think it took me probably up until the last 12 months to really have securely understood who I am to a way where I can handle that without it affecting me much. There's all that whole tall poppy kind of thing as well can be quite big with
So the one life lesson that I share with people on that is, and I've got a 12-year-old son, and I say it to him all the time, people that talk about you says everything about them and nothing about you. So as long as you know who you are, and that keeps bringing it back to that sense of values and purpose, if you know who you are and that your success is in line with who you are as a person, then let them say what they like, because it says everything about them and nothing about you.
Yeah.
I think also we live in a time, and this is what I love so much about Christchurch, I absolutely love it. So prior to the earthquakes, to be honest, it was probably a little bit easy for me. I'd lived in Sydney for a long time. Careers were, challenging. It was competitive. It was, you're on all the time. Positives of that were decision making was quick. You could be successful. There were a lot of career opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. Came to Christchurch, and there were only so many opportunities at the level that I was working at and wanting to work at. And they were interesting, but they didn't have probably the same scope. And then the earthquake happens, and it's not something that we ever would have wished on anyone, but we had to respond to it. And so that created a lot of very interesting opportunities. But also what I think it did was it changed the city for the better. And I talk about it a lot that isn't it great to live in a time where we are collaborative, and like literally we're having a conversation before, I'm happy to connect you to anyone. I want you to succeed. And I feel like that is more the norm than not. So I think people are happy to share their connections. They know that there's enough business for us all. They know that actually the more successful individuals are, the more successful we are as a society, the more successful we are as a city, the more optimistic, the more positive, the more attractive, all of those things. So I think we're very lucky to live in this time, but to live in this city where all of those things are appreciated and encouraged.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think people come here now, and we were talking about a guest we had internationally, they come here now and they look at the city and they go, wow, when you drive around the place now, there's a sure, it's taken longer than maybe people expected to, or whatever, but also a lot of the people that were active and contributed to it, there was a lot of individuals that had to carry load to get us here. It wasn't the kind of thing that could just be built by itself. And I think because of that, there's a camaraderie that's kind of formed within people from Christchurch. I find often, for example, with us, the work we get, if it's from another agency, it's usually an agency from outside of Christchurch. And a key decision point for the business owner will be, I want this to stay in Christchurch. Like, I want it to be someone that I can, and I just don't know if you get that same thing in other cities like you do here.
I think more so now. So again, when I first came here, there was a handful of big advertising agencies, and I worked on big brands, and I was one of these marketing managers who always wanted to keep marketing in Christchurch, because I was like, well, if you're at the university or you're at the economic development agency, how can you then justify using an advertising agency or a marketing agency based in Auckland or Wellington? I think at that time we were still thinking small as a city, and what we've proven over the last 2 decades, or at least 15 years, is that actually we are the second largest city in New Zealand, and we're starting to act like it, and we're starting to act with the confidence. I think I've done a lot of government work, as you mentioned, and most recently I've been working in Wellington for a few days a week. There's a confidence in Christchurch that there's not in the North Island. And even in cities overseas, I think it is really buoyant at the moment. I think also people have, so yes, it's taken longer than we would have liked in some areas. But once you get there, people have short memories of that wait. So I was talking, I think you've got Phil Major coming on the show soon.
Yeah.
I was talking to him just yesterday about the stadium. And I was saying, everyone's whinging about the traffic. It's like talking about weather. I find talking about weather so boring because people say it's cold. Shit, I was outside as well. I know that it's cold. Like there are some things that are just, you don't need to talk about.
Yeah.
So everyone's talking about this bloody traffic around the stadium. Whereas I'm going, isn't this amazing? This is opening in August next year. I'm on the board of the orchestra. We're talking to Venues Altar here about how we might be involved in the opening. Imagine what it's going to be like from August on next year when we've got acts coming to Christchurch. We've got all those things. And then you think back to the Margaret Mayhew Playground. I don't know if you remember, but when they were doing that, all the commentary was about, oh my God, they're spending tens of millions of dollars on a playground. This is ridiculous, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. On the day that that's opened, no one's complained about that playground because actually every time you go there, people are laughing, they're smiling. Everyone from out of town comes and looks at it as, a world-class playground. People can understand it. It's visual. It brings communities and ages together. Yeah. No one complains anymore. And that will happen with the stadium. That will happen with most things. And it doesn't take away from how hard it is for people through it. But we've got to focus on what does it create and what is the story that we can tell around that rather than how hard is it to navigate the traffic.
Yeah, sure. That segues really nicely for a question that's kind of been, so obviously a lot of the work that you do is in leadership, right? And so here's something that I find is a real, as someone who I think is trying to shape up to become the best possible leader that they can be and has a really long way to go, has also come an extremely long way, is human beings, probably more so than me typically, have this drawing towards seeing the negative more than the positive in situations. And I know for certain that doesn't help you as a leader in any way, shape or form. How do you take these people through this journey that are trying to become better leaders and help them see more of the positive side of things to pass that on to the people that they're leading?
Well, you can't lead others until you lead yourself. So I would start with, who are you as a person? What's important to you? What are your values? What's your purpose? Why? And so continuing to unpack and unpack and unpack. And I do think the best leaders are the most self-aware leaders. Yeah. I use a number of tools. So I've learned a lot about myself over the years. I am very self-aware, but I'm also self-reflective, and I'm a constant work in progress, right? And I think everyone's a constant work in progress. I was lucky. I did my MBA here at Canterbury at the time where the director was a local man called Pete Kamick, and he's a leadership specialist. So what I took away from that MBA was so much more awareness of myself, but also a number of tools and largely strengths-based. Yeah. So yes, people can gravitate to the negative. I always try to get people to think from a positive mindset. So I'm coaching someone at the moment who is probably not a good fit for his role, but he's not a bad person. And so I always bring it back to fit and strengths. Yeah. And if you can focus on building your strengths, but without toxic positivity. So I am very positive. It's not a toxic positivity. That's just who I am. Yeah. But that's a lot of, reframe. I'm accredited in neuro-linguistic programming, and NLP is a lot about that reframing. Yeah. So if something is coming up, if something's triggering me, if something's more on that negative mindset, how do I reframe that to something that's more positive? Yep. Like the traffic for me is actually a really good opportunity to stop and see what's happening around the city. So I never see that as a pain. It's, okay, well, this is why I'm stopping and experiencing this. Yep. I think the fact that you are thinking about it says you've got natural leadership tendencies, and you are a great leader, because if you're thinking about it and you want to be better, that makes you great already. Yeah.
I mean, that is probably the hardest bit to get your head around, is understanding and being a little bit younger. I mean, I had a really funny conversation with someone just yesterday, and they were talking about that moment when you first realize that you aren't untouchable, like that first, because you do a little bit, like, it's not too much, it's the right amount, but you do stuff early on and you kind of feel a little bit 10 foot tall and bulletproof for quite a while, and realizing that you're only human kind of gives you all the power in the world, but also takes a lot of that stuff away from you at the same time, because you then realize everyone else is also only human and they've probably got all the same things that they're dealing with too.
Yeah. And that is incredibly powerful, right?
Yeah.
So I think there are a lot of people that do leadership coaching. There are a lot of leaders. There are a lot of people that do similar things to me. I think what I do, and I hope what I do, well, I know it's what I do, is I give people the opportunity to have a voice, because by me sharing about things that aren't comfortable for everyone to share about, it allows other people to do the same.
Yep.
And probably the most pivotal moment for me in my leadership journey was recognizing that vulnerability is a strength. It's not a weakness. And I remember working actually in a very male-dominated field, and I was seeing women modeling themselves on these men, and these men coming to work and almost putting a shield on. And I knew them. They were lovely men, and they had families, and they were lovely family men. But when they got to work, they were on all the time. And then there was these women that were trying to be like them. I was like, hang on a second. You people would be a lot more successful as leaders if you took some of this armor down. And it was through a program that I did that was an Australian and New Zealand program where we sat around with these executives and they just shared their story. And it was when fireside chats, a bit like this, started to become popular. And I was like, oh, thank goodness, we're starting to get to know the person. Yeah. And by that person showing some vulnerability and saying, yeah, no, not everything is perfect. And yeah, I've done this and I've messed up and this is how I felt. Then it gives other people the opportunity to do that too.
Yeah, it is a confronting thing, but it's such a nice thing when you get through. I've just been away with some clients, and on the flight over, someone made a mention to me about that because I got a couple of challenges and I was just freely talking to them all about them. And I'm like, this is what's going on. And I really don't know what the answer is, but this is kind of what I'm thinking. And one of them was on the way back, just like, it's really nice that you just talk about that. There's like, everyone has them. Everyone has the same challenges. And he's like, when you create an environment where you talk about it, people feel like they can then talk about theirs. And it brings everyone into the same thing rather than us all acting like we never have a problem in the world and that, we are that 10-foot tall bulletproof person that I think a few people put up a facade as being.
Yeah. And I think you've just really nicely defined the way that the workplaces are changing because we've been through these periods where everything was about positive rah-rah, let's get on the stage and get people excited about our message. Yep. And then we have the doom and gloom, let's just give facts and figures and talk at you. And now we have conversations. So it comes back to that connection, the engagement, the conversation that everyone gets so much more from than just hearing someone sharing facts and figures or being overly optimistic.
Yeah, sure. How do you balance this? I'm already off script, by the way. This happens usually by about this time. How do you balance then? Because obviously there's so many different personality types. Take a business like mine where we've got 24 people and me here. So many different personality types, so many different stories, and some people will, like you have different levels of contribution and take and different things like that. And some people will want all the help in the world, and some people will blindly almost refuse help and all this. What's the sort of process you're taking leaders through to help them juggle the different archetypes of people that they're dealing with?
So as a leader, I think the most important thing is seeing every individual for who they are. Yeah. And I could tell you now, I could go back to any of these large organisations, to teams that I've led of several hundred people, and I would know their names, I would know their children's names, I know what's important to them. Some of that, again, is the ADHD connection and overemphasis on some of that stuff. But a lot of the work that I do with leaders is, okay, stop worrying about why your leadership style is important to you. Yep. Why is it important to others? And what are you doing to take the time to understand them? Yep. One of the other tools that I'm accredited in is Extended DISC. And Extended DISC is all about style. And it's really around introversion, extroversion, and task and people orientation. Yep. And so if you understand your own style, but you understand the styles of others in your team, it also gives you a language so that I could say, I'm an I, which is very extroverted, very people-oriented. I'm always going to be overly excited. I'm always going to try and sell you a vision. I'm going to come back and try and sell it another way if I can't sell it to you the first time. Yeah. But if you know that, and if your team, so if you know that about your individual team members, but your team know that about each other, then it deals very quickly with any cross-communication and also allows people to feel comfortable, because it gives people a way to go, you know what, I love that you come in and that you're interested in my grandma, but actually I come to work just to do a job, and I'm probably not going to share a lot with you. And that doesn't mean I don't like you. It just means that that's what I need because I need to keep myself safe.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's one of the tools. There's lots of other tools, Riders and Elephants, which is emotional culture deck. I use that with teams as well.
Yeah.
So we can label things. Because if you're an intuitive person, you will pick up on how someone's feeling. So if they're a little bit down and you think, okay, well, I know enough about this person that if I ask them directly, they're not going to want to share. But actually, here's a tool that allows us to name emotions and name why that's a good or a bad thing for us at that time.
Yeah,
so
sure.
there are a range of different tools, but I think it really starts with how interested is the leader in understanding their people.
Yeah.
And look, people challenge me on this. Someone challenged me on this on LinkedIn the other day because I think the most important thing for a leader is to be a people person.
Yeah.
Not everyone's going to agree, but you know, if that's your style of leadership, then that's where I would start.
Yeah. What was their challenge? What are the...
That some people are very task-oriented, and that doesn't mean they're bad leaders. I would probably call them a manager, but anyway. I wasn't going to get into an argument on an online forum because I don't think, again, a lot of the work that I do, I'll go in, someone goes in to do strategy with a business. They go, yep, actually the strategy is really sound, but the team's not operating well together.
Yeah.
And so, again, if you don't have someone that can lead that team and understand enough, because you know, people get confused about, oh, an extrovert's a great people leader. No, not necessarily. Some of the best leaders I've worked with have been introverted, because that's about an energy. It's not about whether they're willing to stand up and talk. It's about an energy. But some of the best leaders are not the ones that are going to get people to walk over broken glass for them, but they know that they need that person that the team will walk across broken glass for. So they're good at working out who they need on their team and how to complement their own skills and also plug their own gaps.
Yep.
And that's why I think that seeing every individual is so important, because you can't have one person trying to do everything. That one person should be seeing the individuals, building a team that knows and know that they're going to bring the whole team with them.
Yeah, sure. I find it really interesting because I personally find nothing really comes less naturally to me than leadership. I'm very intuitive, deeply introverted. So I find it really hard to do the thing that I know that I should do. Is probably more the way that I would describe it. But that's something that will continue to be a battle that I'll work with over the next little bit. But and then you see someone come in who say is extroverted, and you're kind of like, I feel like you got a little bit of a superpower over me in the sense that you like actively want to do these tasks, but maybe doesn't have the same intuition where sometimes they do things incorrectly. I tend to not miss, but not act enough. But yeah, it is a constant struggle, especially because really I just like, am a Facebook ads person who just wound up with all these people that sort of, so yeah, it moves quite quickly. One of the things that I noticed was the Love Christchurch campaign. When I was doing the research, and I thought that was really cool. Could you touch a little bit on that and what it meant to you to be involved in it and that sort of thing?
Oh, I loved that, and it's still one of my most proud moments in my career. So we had the September earthquake, and at that time I was working for the Economic Development Agency, and we went to government and we said, we need to help the city get back on its feet. We need to give people confidence. And at the time, a lot of businesses were able to keep trading, right? So yes, there were some buildings that were damaged. There were some people that had to move out. But by and large, we got back to business pretty quickly. Yeah. And then we had a Boxing Day earthquake aftershock. And so the retailers who had got their optimism back and were really looking forward to this Boxing Day sale were then hit by the Boxing Day earthquake. So we quickly pivoted and went to the Ministry of Social Development and got some funding to do a promotion called the Boxing Day Replay. Yeah. And so then we did this Boxing Day Replay. That was in February. And then we were hit by the large earthquake. And so it just felt like one thing after another for these poor people to be dealing with. And as I say, I'm such a cheerleader for Christchurch. And so we had this funding. We were supposed to be doing these programs to get people back into the CBD. The CBD was now shut down indefinitely. But there were people that still loved this city. Yeah. And so we formed a group called Canterbury Business Leaders Group. And it was chaired by a brilliant man, Don Elder, who was at that time the CEO of Solid Energy. And essentially every CEO in Christchurch was involved. And at the time of the earthquake, there was still what people would refer to as the Old Boys Club. There are a number of very strong, very visible leaders. And some people would call it the Old Boys Club in that it was negative and you couldn't break in. I have found those people the most supportive people, and they really did help shape and define my career. But we would sit around and we would talk about, okay, we need to keep people's optimism in this city. It's hard. The insurance companies are multinational. They don't necessarily have the love for the city that we have living here. So what can we do? And there's a brilliant creative who still works in the city, Stephen McCarthy. And at the time, he was working with a company called Make Collective.
Yep.
And we were all kind of just throwing ideas around and like, right, what can we do? And we're trying to make it big and fancy. And it's like, you know what? We just love Christchurch, and the city we love is still here. It's just a little bit different. Yeah. So that then became our tagline. And so I went out and I spoke to people like Don, and I went to the cheesemongers, and I went to the Wonder Bar, and I went to Sam Johnson because the Student Volunteer Army was about, and went to these people and businesses that loved the city and came from there. We initially got funding from government, but then I got companies like IAG, like Spark to fund their own campaigns.
Yeah,
so then
cool.
we got their staff involved, and their staff who were working really hard and potentially getting negative feedback saw themselves up on billboards, and again it connected them to the city. And we had badges, Love Christchurch badges. So we had all the politicians wearing them. We had everyone, and I think I just gave everyone a bit of a lift.
Yeah,
it was simple, and I found the creative concept for it just the other day, and it was the red and the pink, and it was the red was the old Christchurch and the pink was the new Christchurch, and literally it was two colour swatches, and we went like that, and that got the heart, and it all went from there.
Yeah. How cool. Having obviously you just ooze passion, and I know that you mentioned that was a big part of one of your drivers. How have you found operating, say, in the private sector, where maybe things are typically able to move a little bit more dynamically and quickly versus, say, working in like government or something like that, where there are just extra hoops to run through? And do you ever get frustrated with that passion, but then having to be a little bit slower with it at times?
I think working in government, so I've loved every industry that I've worked in because I like the challenge of how do I adjust my style to this environment. And working in government probably made me even more confident in that is what I need to do, because I remember I would walk into Grant Robinson's office, and to begin with, I thought I got into these roles within government. I was head of government relations at a time when the government was changing and the challenge was to build relationships. And I went in there thinking, I need to tone me down. I'm too much for this. Yeah. And I did. And then I thought, hang on a second, that goes against everything that I stand for. Yeah. So I really clearly remember going into Grant Robinson's office one day in a bright orange tutu, and he said, yep, she's here. And I said, yep, and you'll always know that I'm here. But I think what it is you want to develop relationships and have trust and respect. And I am actually very good at what I do in my technical, and in that head of government relations, I was good. And so you can be yourself, provided you should always be yourself. Yep. But they need to know what yourself is and what the brand is and what you stand for, and that you can deliver. And so I've found that as long as I've delivered, and again in government, so yes, I think in corporate businesses, more decisive, you've got your budgets, you know what you're responsible for, you've got KPIs, you've got, what do we call them, balance scorecards, you've got all of these business tools that makes everything very clear. I was successful in government because actually people found me a breath of fresh air. And so then my role became, okay, well, how do I help others bring who they are into this environment? Yeah. And how do we challenge, and how do we have the confidence? Because there are a lot of people in a lot of systems who go, you know what, we're doing things this way because we always have. Yeah. And my question will always be why. Because just because you've always done it that way doesn't mean it's the way that you should do it. So what different outcome would you get if you changed that? And so, yeah, I think that's where I'm able to affect culture change, because I don't just go in and go, oh, well, this is going to be a slow ride. I'm actually there for a reason, and I trust that they've got me in because they believe in that reason.
Yeah, and I'm sure that it backs up as well. I love the concept of authenticity in environments like that as well. I think something that can be really hard is trying to encourage people to be themselves, because I think that often so much of how they would think they are is made up of how they think they're supposed to be rather than who they actually are. Where have you found that from for yourself?
So really connected to who I am.
Yeah.
I think I was talking to someone about this morning. My grandmother's 97 and a half.
Yeah.
And formidable woman, eldest of 9, had 7 children herself, was a farmer and a teacher, and my grandfather had his own dipping business. And so that we've always been very busy.
Yeah.
And her sisters, she's 97 and a half, she's got a 94-year-old, a 92-year-old. I saw them on the weekend. They're still, every time I see them, they've got this same energy. Their mother was a dressmaker. We were always individual and confident in our individuality. And I think it does come back to that, to my great-grandmother, because she was creating bespoke things that look like Trelise Cooper now when we look at it, 100 and something years ago.
Yeah.
And so being different was not different for me. It was for me.
Right.
We were always different. We're always happy to stand out. I have unpacked a lot over the years, and I go, is my confidence too much? Should I care more about security and tradition? Should I not challenge as much? Should I, could I be more successful in my career if I was more like that person, and if I was a bit quieter, and if I didn't challenge? But I do believe that I have a voice for a reason, and that I have a responsibility to use that voice. And I have seen it change systems and change organisations. And if that benefits someone else, doesn't matter if it doesn't benefit me, as long as it benefits someone else, then I should be doing it. Yeah.
And it's just one of those, I think that I've been nothing but impressed the moment that you've been in here, because there is a, I don't think it's overpowering. I don't think it's, and that is a hard, once again, we mentioned, we're talking before about the dichotomies of some, it is a hard balance. I had a guest on here last week who oozed confidence and just somehow never overstepped into being egotistical. And I was like, I don't think I've ever spoken to someone who's been, was able to get away with saying things like, I'm built for this. And it didn't come across like he was, but I also think, and you probably have the same thing too, is you also have internally proven to yourself so many times now that you back it up and that the person that you are is right, that you don't really have that doubt anymore. It's sort of removed. I think repetitions tend to beat that imposter syndrome kind of thing, but it can take some time. I think that I think it's a really, really tough balancing act, but it's something that's really cool. It would be amazing to try to figure out how to bring that out of people. And
I think one thing is consistency. And so, I keep coming back to knowing yourself. So if you spoke to people who knew me, what they would say is I'm 100% consistent. So I don't show up half-hearted one day and then full in the next day. I show up with the same energy all the time. I'm consistent. My line is my values, and I leave organisations and I leave leaders and I leave environments that don't align with my values. I don't ever say that anything is a bad environment, a toxic environment. There's a wrong environment for me or for you. And so it all comes back to self-responsibility of knowing yourself, knowing the right environment, knowing the right relationship, the right workplace, the right partners to work with, all of those things. But I bring it back to it's always about me. And so same thing with people I'm coaching. You can't blame anything else. And if you know yourself and know all of those things about yourself, your values, your purpose, your lines, all of those things, you don't blame anyone else because you're in control of it.
Yeah. What a cool attitude. I really enjoy that. What are some of the most common challenges you find when you're stepping into organizations, trying to improve culture and leadership and things like that?
There's usually someone or some people who don't believe it needs to change. And, we've always done things this way and it's worked for now, until now. So why should we change? And then you look around and you see people are falling apart. It's usually leaders who aren't self-aware, but also are not connected. So they're not hearing what's going on for the people. And usually if there's something wrong with the culture, you hear it from the people. You experience it when you walk in. I tell this story around, I don't know if you've been to New York, but before you go, you ask people what it's like and they say, oh, you have to go there. And you say, well, what's it like? Oh, it's everything. I can't explain it. It's everything. Yeah. It's the smells, it's the noises, it's the sounds, it's the people, it's all these things. And you think, oh, yeah, right. And then you go there and actually you can't explain it. It is all of those things.
Yeah, right.
And to me, culture's like that. So you have to experience and you feel it, and you walk into an organisation and you can feel it pretty much straight away. You know whether this is a happy place to work or it's not a happy place to work. I say you can. We can, because we're intuitive people. There are people who are very task-oriented, who are not attached to feelings, who are not feeling any of that stuff, and then don't even really worry about it. Yeah. So they don't even know that it's something they have to worry about. They don't realise that if their culture was better, their organisation would be a lot more successful. Yeah. So, I mean, that's the biggest challenge is, just people accepting that there is an issue or there's not, and wanting to do something about it.
Sure. And if you're like overly logical, it's so hard to understand it because you can't base it off logic, but it does have an impact on the numbers that you care about. You can just never, aligning it with something that just doesn't match, but kind of is the way that my brain thinks about it, is it's like brand work when it comes to marketing versus like your performance marketing stuff. Is one is the X in, X out transactional piece. The other one is this weird thing that you kind of just do over here that you think is working, but you can never really prove whether it works or not. And then, this podcast has been like that for us. It's a really fun side quest for me and one that I've deeply enjoyed. But it's also, I just had someone come up to me the other day who runs a $70 million a year construction company in Baby Bunting while I was looking at a new car seat for my 8-month-old. And he was just like, Matt, I absolutely love what you're doing. I've been meaning to reach out to you. I'll touch base over the next couple of weeks. And so you go, you know that this is doing something to this thing that you care about, but you can't see it. So you just have to kind of have faith almost, which can be quite intimidating and scary, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's another subject altogether, and I would go down a rabbit hole, but it's like networking, right? So I coach a lot of people on the art of networking, and they think that they go and have a coffee or they go and have one wine and they've now got this network of people they can call on. It's like, no, that's a coffee and a wine. Yeah. Actually, what you need to do is be consistent and build relationships and know how those relationships, don't put any value on them to begin with, but just know that that's a long burn, and so is culture, and so is the impact of all of those things. And it is the things that you don't realise that are just happening in the background, but you're being consistent in, that are actually building your brand, your personal brand, and your value. It's not about trying to sell to that guy so he'll now buy something from you because he's seen you and he knows what you stand for, not because you're putting ads out there that you're hoping to convert like that.
Yeah. And then there's just this beautiful art of, I suppose, trying to balance those two together. So you can win today and win in 3 years, and you can do that in a way where, and if you put too much on one side of the seesaw, the other one will be affected. And so it's a really fine balancing act.
Well, a brief side story, this is how I ended up here today, right? So I do a lot of sharing on LinkedIn, and I do it because, again, I think I talk with authenticity and experience on things that some other people aren't confident enough to speak on. So anyway, I was at a function, and you can edit this out if you need to, but Jaya's husband,
you're right,
Mike, said to me, oh, you're Renee Walker. And I was like, yeah. And he said, a fruit bowl is not a wellbeing strategy. And I said, oh, clearly you follow me on LinkedIn. Yeah. And he did. And so he'd seen that on LinkedIn. I didn't know him. Sometimes I think, are these thousands of connections doing anything for me? Yeah. But so often I'll be at a golf day volunteering and someone will say, oh, I saw you on LinkedIn talking about this, or I saw you on LinkedIn talking about that. And so it is all building your brand. Yeah. It's like your transactional marketing.
Yeah. And it will pay off one day. And so you just have to keep pouring into that bucket, and you just have to have faith. And that's the way that we, as we're growing up as a business, because our early days we were just the performance marketing kids, and there was like 3 or 4 of us, and we're real good at running performance Facebook ads. As we're developing and growing, we're taking these customers on this journey, and it's such a fun one. Is like really getting to it. And all of a sudden I found, like, I thought my passion was spending $1 on Facebook ads and pulling 20 back in the door and then repeating that process over and over again as fast as I could. But it turns out my passion is figuring out what a customer's purpose is, and then starting to tell that story to people en masse, and then holding the customer's hand as they have to do that for a year, or 18 months or 24 months before they even see the outcome from it, and then the outcome coming at the other side.
Yeah.
Like we've got customers who've had huge impacts on their market perception already, but you can't even measure that. And so it's just such a fun thing when you go like, I know now that you aren't on the front page of Stuff once a week for something negative, so we know that's a positive. But it's when you start reading the Reddit comments or the Stuff article comments, and all of a sudden there's this surge of like, I think this kid's just working really hard trying to make things work, and people are seeing their perspective. You go, it's fun being involved in that. It's transformative as opposed to just money orientated.
Yep.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, it can be really, really cool. Talk to me a little bit about the Leadership Revolutionist. Obviously, that's your current main thing. Is that right? Yeah.
Yep.
Talk to me about that and what its purpose is and where it sits in the market.
It's all about this transformation of the workplace, right?
Yeah.
So revolutionist is someone who won't just sit on the sidelines and comment, but get in and do something about it. And that's always been the way that I've approached things. I can see that businesses, leaders and aspiring leaders need help to adapt or to learn or to grow in a world of work that's changing. And I think particularly in the last 2 years, so I've had the business for over 10 years and we'll go in and out of contract roles, but keep coming back to this. And I think at the moment it's the busiest I've ever been because the world of work is ready for transformation. And so individuals are seeing that they need to transform as well.
Yeah.
And so the work that I do is largely around culture, leadership, strategy, and it comes through a range of different avenues. Sometimes there's an employment relations issue, so I'll go in to help with that. And then next thing, we're working on a much bigger project, or there's one leader who realises that they need some support. And then next thing, but usually for a workplace, I think to transform, for culture to transform, you need everyone kind of going, okay, I need to know more about myself. Because I'm creating then an environment where there's a ripple. I talk about a movement, so it's not a mandate, it's a movement. And for movements to occur, you need a group of people. You don't need one person within an organisation who's now got all this self-awareness.
And that person, I mean, we're sort of experiencing this at the moment, but if that person does come in and they do give it a red hot crack, but they feel like they're running against the tide, you tend to lose those people pretty quickly as well. That they give a lot and you can see it. And I do have to be cautious about how much I share, but it's a really interesting. I haven't watched it before like this, and it can be, I suppose, disheartening. It's the kind of thing where you've got to make sure you learn from it and make sure you try to iron some things out before that next person comes in. But to see that happen, especially as like the person who owns the company, is really interesting to try to get your head around and to watch the other personality types and the way that they respond and to be intuitive and to know that they are either protecting themselves or they feel like they did. It's wild to watch.
Yeah. If you can have honest conversations and if you've got a good basis of trust, then I think most things, the best approach is to just have an honest conversation.
Yeah.
And so I see it in workplaces. I had a staff member who worked for me and I could see straight away that she was miserable.
Yeah.
And so everyone was just trying to make her happy again. It was like, the girl is miserable because this is absolutely the wrong role for her.
Yeah.
She's not a bad person. It's not a bad organisation. It's not a toxic environment. It is the wrong role for this girl. She has ADHD and every morning I would hear them saying, so-and-so's 3 minutes late for work. So-and-so's 7 minutes late for work. And I said, I'm really sick of hearing this. She's always going to be late for work. She has time blindness. So it doesn't matter. You can change the start time. She will still be late for that start time.
Yeah.
You need to adapt the way that you lead her. And then it becomes, oh, well, it's a call centre environment. We can't adapt for everyone. I believe that you can because teams of work should be able to ebb and flow and you should be able to. But I had a conversation with her and asked her how the role was, how it felt for her. And I said, you're a really creative girl. And, all I hear is so-and-so's late for work again. Like that must be really hard on you as well. And so we started to explore whether it was the right role, whether it was the right environment. And she came back to me a couple of days later and she said to me, do you know, I've been shit at my job for 9 years and you're the first person that's ever cared. And all it took was a conversation and seeing her. And because what that created was she wasn't a good fit for the role. Everyone else resented it. She was miserable and everyone was just trying to make her happy. Actually, she needed to move on, which didn't mean it was a bad thing, but it didn't make the environment bad. It just made it better for the ones that were right for the environment and better for her because she wasn't there.
And it's not her losing or her. It's just like it doesn't fit. It doesn't.
Yeah.
It's come up a couple of times, and I know that it's a really commonly spoken about thing. So talk to me about this ADHD. So you've got it, and I'm assuming. I think people are saying it jokingly to me. I'm not sure, but people tell me to go get tested all the time. I have a couple of staff that have it. I've had staff that have come and that have gone that have had it. What I've always just put it down to, and all of my friends who are wired sort of the same way as me, as it's more of a superpower than anything else. And that's the way that I've always viewed it as, hey, look, I know that there's some parts of this that are challenging, like the fact that it's virtually impossible for me to be on time anywhere and that I'm all over the show all the time and that, huge lists of work can kind of cause me some challenges and things like that. But I also have an energy pool that's virtually unlimited, and I have other things like that I think outweigh it. What's your experience with it been like, and what is advice that you've got for people that have
So I 100% see it as a superpower, but that's because I manage it. So I'm not medicated. I choose not to be medicated because I don't want to dull this down. I'm quite happy with who I am and the way that I operate. It just made everything make sense to me. Yeah. So for many, many years, and I wish that I knew 25, 30 years ago, I think people have the perception that it's thrown around all the time now and every second person's ADHD. And look, we can put a whole lot of labels on ourselves. For me, I had eating disorders. I have had broken marriages. I've left roles. I've moved countries within a week. I've made very impulsive decisions. I've been late to God knows how many things. I get myself very worked up about it as well, but I can't help it. I can't. So I either have to be early or I'm an hour late. Yeah. And it's not just about being late. And that's how I started to have these epiphanies where I was like, hang on a second. Like for me, it is time blindness. So literally, if I needed to be here at 1 and I was ready to leave home at 20 to 1 and it only takes me 10 minutes, I would then think, oh, well, I'll start polishing the silver, which I've never done before in my life. Yeah. And then next thing, it's 45 minutes later and I haven't meant to be late and I don't want to be. Yeah. I just can't help it. The time blindness, big thing, impulsivity, hyper focus. So quite often I'm up till 3 a.m, hyper focused on something. So, I'll have a month to do it. I'll start and I'll have it 90% done and then I'll leave it for 25 days. And then the day before it's due, I'm up till 3 or 4 a.m. And the quality of my work is good. So it's not that I don't want to do it. It's not that I'm lazy. It's not that I don't know how to. I just can't work in any different way. And so for years and years, people have laughed about these things. But for me, having a diagnosis and understanding it just makes my life make sense. And as I say, I do wish I knew 25 years ago. I still wouldn't have medicated. Yeah. But I also don't think I would have suffered from eating disorders. I wouldn't have been diagnosed with anxiety and depression and some of those things that actually were ADHD. Yeah. And had I known that, I would have managed very differently.
Yeah, right. That's really interesting because everyone's telling me to go. Like I kind of say about it jokingly, but I struggle with a number of other things that I've noticed from it. And maybe it would help, maybe it wouldn't. I've always just kind of been like, I'm happy with who I am. That's sort of, and I think it's probably a similar thing to where you got. I've been like, it sucks and sure I hyper-focus and I do all these weird things that don't make sense to anyone and I have all this stuff, but I kind of like it. Like that's kind of how I put it down to, and I'm like, it's all,
Yeah, and as long as it's not negatively affecting you or other people. Yeah. And again, I feel sad about some of the impacts I've probably had on other people from not knowing. But what I also think it does, now knowing, means that I am a much better leader, I'm a much better friend, I'm a much better person, I'm a much better daughter, all of those, mother, all of those things, because I understand why I do things in a certain way. And whether I change it or not, I can explain it. And I'm not making excuses and I'm not explaining it away. I'm helping people to understand why and how. Yeah. And I think that has made my relationships with people much better as well. Because to be honest, it's annoying, right? If you've got a partner and you're up till 4 a.m. and you're going, oh, well, yeah, I'll come to bed at 4 a.m. Like it's not, and it's not, I'm not going to say it's not a normal way because it's our way. Yeah. But it can be challenging for other people if they Yeah, if they don't operate in that way. So being able to explain it, I think, is really useful.
I think a good example and I just spare room it now. That's the solution we've come to. I'm like, this way I'm less disruptive. But like, Jen, we've got an 8-month-old, right? Like I mentioned before. So she needs sleep. And I don't really. Like, don't get me wrong, like I'm better with it. And by don't need sleep, I don't mean that I can stay up for 72 hours. I'm not a mutant or anything. But like, if we have 3 or 4 or 5 days in a row where I sleep very little, I can just sort of catch up and I'm like, it's okay. And the focus will override how tired I feel. So I'll do a 5 a.m. till midnight, 1 a.m. work day a few days in a row sometimes when I've got things that I'm really focused on. I just am like, I can't wake you every time I go. I can't. So I just kind of separate. And I've kind of said, hey, the reason we both agreed that I sleep in the spare room is not because we don't like each other and we want to sleep in different beds or anything weird like that. It's just like functionally it works. I've still been up when Archie's woken up for his 4 a.m. feed and then been like, oh, that's great. Jen won't wake up. So I go grab him and things like that. So I'm like, I try to see the positives in it rather than the negatives. And then sometimes I'll come into work 15 minutes later than I normally would or whatever because I'm a bit tired in the morning. But by the time I'm here and I've had a couple of coffees, I'm back to normal again anyway. It doesn't. So it's just that. I think it's just seeing it for what it is and also not allowing social norms to impact the way you behave with it. I think that's the big thing is having a person you can be like, I think on nights like this, I should probably just go to the spare room and that doesn't mean I hate you. And they're like, yeah, that doesn't. And then you can just solve it. You have to go one at a time, you know? Or, hey, I may not be the best example for the team here sometimes because I might come into work and it might be 8:45 a.m., but they probably didn't see that I was still sending emails at 3. And so you just have to go, so we're just going to operate in an environment where that just is the way that it works. And
And that's real life, right? So when I'm coaching people, that's what I said, that's actually really good if you don't come in to work at the same time every day. Because when we say that we offer a flexible workplace and then everyone's watching the clock and passing some kind of judgment because we should all be here at 8:30, then you've got your actions say a lot more than your words. So actually verbalizing that and be really honest about it. And it's almost a bit of that vulnerability as well that, hey, I'm a bit late today and I might be a bit tired because I was up till 3 a.m. And that's not a badge of honor either. So it's not that you're saying that everyone has to do that. You're just saying we're all different. Our energy levels are all different. How we work is different and that's okay. And again, I think for me, a lot of work I do is with neurodivergent people and helping to create the space for them to be successful. And understanding all of those things has made me able to do that, but it's also made me a lot better. I used to say that I wasn't very good at school, but then I got to university and it was a much better environment. And so I failed economics at school and I passed it at university. And I used to think, well, how did that happen? Or, I'd be up till 3 a.m. because I did my undergrad and full-time and worked full-time at the same time. So then I had this disrespect of the system because I was like, well, I should never have been able to pass that. And same with my MBA. But actually, after my ADHD diagnosis, I go, okay, well, of course, all of that makes sense. It wasn't that the course wasn't hard enough and I should blame the course. That's the way that I work. And so, yes, I was doing it at 3 a.m. I was always going to do it at 3 a.m. And understanding. And so now one of my other businesses actually is helping students get ready for university, but it's also helping them recognise why they might have challenges at school. It will not be about them. It will be about the environment and the way that their learning is being structured.
Interesting. I mean, a lot of the things you're bringing up resonate with me and I'd never thought about them. So that's, I appreciate it. It's cool. It's a cool way to sort of maybe challenge myself a little bit to, on some things. Because I'd imagine you do, like I feel enormous guilt around being late or things like that. But I suppose it's like, I just worked, and once again, this is very much not a badge of honor thing. I agree because I don't actually like to encourage the whole work lots thing. Like it makes you better than other people. Work lots if you like working lots. Work as little as possible if you like working a little. And I'm deeply jealous of my friends that would care more about social basketball than working. I think that's really cool. But trying to get your head around that is hard because the guilt can be quite bad. You're like, why was I 15 minutes late to work today? And you just did an 100-hour week. And it just seems silly or like even probably trying to process it with my relationships out. There's like I'll do a week like that and then I tend to have huge like decompressions where like 12 hours my brain won't work and I'll just be really like, and then trying to explain to someone why I'm like that, and that doesn't mean that I don't want to be having that coffee that I'm having with them or doing. It's just like I'm just toast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you having those conversations is powerful in itself because I get really upset if I am late. I don't want to be late.
Yeah.
And I went to a friend's hen's party recently and I was ready to go. But then because I was ready to go early, I thought, I might just try on 17 different outfits.
Yeah.
And so then I was an hour late. And when I walked in there, she said to everyone there, oh, Renee would be late to her own funeral. And everyone laughs. I was already carrying guilt. I was already feeling shit. I was like, and then I get to the point where I'm so late, should I just not even go?
Yeah,
and so there's a lot of internal dialogue goes on. I don't just rock in happy that I'm an hour late.
Yeah.
And the flip side of that is there'll be people there going, she's so rude, because they value time. And so they like being on time. And neither of us is right or wrong. We're just very different.
Yeah.
And so where I used to internalize all of that and feel so hurt that I was being judged and feel judged, I now say that, like, yes, I would be late to my own funeral because I would be trying on all the outfits, because I would be trying to make sure the earrings match.
Yeah.
That's how my head works.
Yeah. I have two little things that I always try to humanize that sort of stuff, because I'm like stress out because I'm not sure if the color of my shoes is right or something. That's stupid when I think about it in hindsight. But also if another person is late to something with me, I make a really conscious effort to be like, don't stress about it. I'm like, don't worry at all. It makes no difference to my life. I had 100 things to do before this. I now only have 99 to do afterwards because I had time to do one of those things really quickly. Don't worry about it. And I just feel like that buys me a little bit of like internal don't stress sometimes. Like I treat other people the way that I'd hope someone else would think about it. Some people do care a little bit more about that stuff than others. And I also love being early when I'm early. It's not that I don't like it. It's not that I like cover, but yeah, I get you for sure.
It takes the stress out, I think, if you can either be early. Yeah, well, I'm either early or late. There's no in between.
Yeah.
It's not an on time.
Yeah. And how frustrating is it, just as a little bit of a closing note before we kind of start wrapping up, but when someone's like, well, why don't you just plan around being there 15 minutes early? You're like, I will fill the void. You can't, you know what I mean? Like this is not solved that simply. I know that maybe for you it is, but yeah, I will fill the void.
There's also the avoidance thing. Like I'd probably take up roller skating in that 15 minutes. So I'd find something completely different to do to film.
Yeah. This has been really cool. I've really enjoyed this chat so far. I have a little bit of a closing question that we ask all of our guests that come on, and then one more thing for you after that. So the closing question is, obviously, all of the different roles you've done, all the different experiences that you could have, they've all taken you through to this point. If there's one thing that you could do differently along the way, what would that thing be?
Stay truer to myself, because when I look at when I've been the most successful and when my energy has been the best, because when you're not yourself, you're using energy. I'm always at my best when I'm myself, and I would have been kinder to myself and just being kinder and truer.
Nice. What a great answer. If someone's listened to this and they have liked what you've said or they want to connect with you further, what are the best ways for them to touch base with you?
So it's very easy. My website is reneewalker.co.nz. My LinkedIn is Renee Walker. My email is renee@reneewalker. So
Nice.
all they need to do is remember my name.
Yeah, sure. And then love Christchurch Instagram. Is that a public one or is that? Yeah.
Everyone can get on board with that too. Yeah.
So we have a huge Instagram audience. So I will, cool. Hey, is there anything final you'd like to add to the episode or anything like that?
No, just thank you so much. And it's really refreshing to see that people are interested in these stories and that the world of work is transforming. And we talked about it earlier off air, that people buy people. Yeah. So you can have all the flashy brands in the world. You can present yourself in a way, but they buy you. So if you can come back to that genuine, authentic, this is who I am. Not everyone's going to like it. That says more about them than it does about me, but turn up and be yourself. And I think you've done that really well today, and it's been a great conversation. So thank you.
I appreciate it. I really, really appreciate you coming. If you've listened up until this point, make sure that you go and check Renee out on all of the social medias, have a look at her website, all of that kind of thing. Follow us on Spotify. If you want to watch this, it's also on YouTube as well. And as always, thank you very much for listening. Thanks again, Renee. This has been really enjoyable.